We're now going to talk about boundaries. Boundaries. Okay, and this is important when you're dealing with a continuous variable here. So let me make sure things are focused. You can probably do a little better than that. That's pretty good. So let's think about someone's weight. That's a continuous variable whenever you measure the weight of something. And so if I were to say, I stepped on the scale and I was 172 pounds, okay, that does not mean that I weigh exactly 172 pounds, okay? Let me explain what I mean. So let's say here's my scale, 173, 174, 175. And this might be 171, 170, 169. Okay, so here's the scale, and if I'm measuring to the nearest pound, okay, if I go halfway between these two, this would be 171.5, 172.5. And so if I were measuring to the nearest pound, then that probably means I step on the scale and then it rounds to the nearest pound. Okay? So if I were 171.5, right, that would round up to if I was rounding to the nearest pound, that would round up to 172. Okay? Now if I were 172.5, that would actually round up to 173. So I would have an open circle here. Okay, so this would be a closed circle, meaning this one would be included, but this one would actually round up to 173. Now, any number between these two then would round to 172. So I could be anywhere from 171.5 all the way up to, but not including 172.5. And I would round to 172. And so what I say here is that the boundaries for 172 pounds is 171.5 all the way up to, but not including 172.5. And I just write this, okay? And so these are the boundaries for this number when you're measuring to the nearest pound. So let's say I was measuring to the nearest tenth of a pound. And let me see if I can do this a little bit. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So let's say if I was measuring to the nearest tenth of a pound, let's say I would be 172.4, we'll say. That would be my actual weight, and of course that would have rounded down to 172. So I would be like right here in this interval. But if I'm now measuring to the nearest tenth of a pound, then this would be 172.3, 172.2, 172.1, 172.5, 172.6. Okay, so this is now my scale. I've kind of zoomed in on this portion, right? And I'm measuring to the nearest tenth of a pound. So if I wanted to know the boundaries of 172.4, okay, then I'm assuming we're rounding to the nearest tenth of a pound, and I would have to go halfway between these two. And this one would be 172.35. And this one up here would be 172.45. Okay? And so it would include this one, because this one would round up to 172.4. And it would go all the way up to, but not include this one, because this one would round up to 172.5. And then any number in between here is going to round to 172.4. And so what I would say is the boundaries for this number are 172.35 all the way up to, but not including, 172.45. And so these would be the boundaries to 172.4. Okay. Now there's a trick to this. You don't have to draw out a diagram or whatever to do this every time. So let's say I was using a stopwatch and I was measuring, let's say, a chemical reaction. And let's say it was, 0.437 seconds or something like that. Okay, and now I want to know the boundaries to this. Well, clearly I'm measuring to the nearest thousandth of a second. This is the thousandth place. And so to get the boundaries, what I do is I rewrite this number, but I lower the 7 to a 6, and then I add a 5. Okay, and then the upper, and that'll be my lower boundary. To get the upper boundary, I rewrite the number as it is, and then I add a 5. And that's always going to work. So like for this one, right, I'm going to lower the last place, so it'd be 172 point, lower that, add a 5, and I get this. And now this, keep it the same, add a 5. Okay? And so that trick will always work. So I'll do one more here. So if I were really measuring, like 0.81732 seconds or something. So really, really accurately. Then I'm going to rewrite the whole thing, but the last digit I lower by 1, add a 5, and then I'm going to rewrite the whole thing and then add a 5, and there I get the boundaries. So that's a nice way of knowing how to do the boundaries. So let me give you a chance to try some of these. Just a few simple ones there. Go ahead and hit pause, give it a try, and then start it back up, and you can see how you did. Okay, so we'll go ahead and see how you did here. I'll go ahead and use this. So 152 pounds. So if it's a whole number, then just subtract 0.5, add 0.5, right? So 151.5 to 152.5. So for whole numbers, that's what you're going to do. Okay? And so this one would be 69 inches. This would be 68.5 to 69.5. So you're adding and subtracting 0.5. So 0.47 grams. This would be 0.465 to 0.475. And then I have 3.25 miles. And I would get 3.245 to 3.255. Okay? And then finally, this one, here's the way to think about this. So I can't lower the 0 by 1. So what you can do is think of this as being the number 30, and then lower 30 by 1, and you'd have 29. So 7.295, and then you keep it the same. 0, 5. So if it's a 0 in the last place, then just take that as a number, 30, and then lower 30 by 1, getting 29, add a 5, and then keeping 30 the same, and adding a 5. So that's boundaries, and when you're dealing with continuous variables, oftentimes you end up the boundaries are involved in some way.